how were you accepted by the law enforcement agencies, by the police officers? Were you actually sitting in the car with them?
Yeah, for their entire shift.
How was that? How did that work?
We was on a rotation for a reason. So the idea of having me on a rotation between these agencies and different officers and different deputies, part of that was so like no one individual would just get sick of always carrying me around like a human backpack while they try to do their job. It was a very unusual project even back then when it was greenlit in 2010. So I did 18 months formally between 2010 and 2012, and that was over 1,000 hours. And then I did another 500 hours between 2013 and 15, but in a less formal and less structured way for another project. But to answer your question, early on, I think it took some getting used to because, to my knowledge, I'm the only one of 2 reporters that's ever done that.
Wow.
So it was unusual even back then. Today it's unthinkable. I mean, I've said many times that project would, I don't think, ever get approved today. But it was...
And the reason is, you think that...
I think the political climate's different. Yeah. I think trust between law enforcement and members of the media has never been lower. Mm-hmm. I think... And even someone like me who's been around for 18 years and has a track record that anybody can look at, and you'd like to think you have a certain professional reputation. Yeah. But I still don't think that would climb over the political obstacles that would exist today. So, so today I say it's unthinkable, but it was very unusual even at the time. I think the only other time it had been done was in 1989 on the East Coast with another reporter. So, but how did they accept me? I mean, I probably was split up between over 2 years, 30 different deputies and officers, so it really depended on the person. But I got really close with some of them. You know, I still talk to some of them today. I'm still friends with some of them today, all these years later. So they got used to it. Once they saw I wasn't going to do anything stupid and
like get yourself shot or anything like that.
Well, not do something that's going to jeopardize an investigation that's happening in real time, and not do anything that's going to cause them to have to be distracted from what they have to focus on. I mean, once they understood that I was figuring out how to not do that, then I think their comfort level went up. It would be interesting if you had them here to ask them. Yeah.
Can you give us a sense of what the police officers or law enforcement officers are like? You know, their psyche, like how do they operate? And you know, there's a lot of talk about the bad cops that do bad things. And give us a sense of what you experienced.
Well, I took a lot of heat for saying on Robert Harrison's podcast recently that I think there's more cerebrally stunted and mediocre journalists than there are bad cops. That definitely...
I don't think you'll get hit on our program for saying that.
That definitely caused plenty of tissues to get passed around certain quarters. But I stand by that. Mm-hmm. There's no question that some people in our profession have happily misled the public about the reality on the streets.
Yes.
And what the typical threat really is. It's not the officers, typically.
Right.
And what I saw in all that time when I was embedded was most of those officers and deputies were trying their hardest in an unassuming way to do a dangerous and pretty impossible job every night. And more often than not, the vast majority of the time, their conduct, their professionalism, and their actions were what the community would support, if not be proud of. And don't misunderstand me. I have seen and I have covered instances of reckless law enforcement tactics that have resulted in disaster, bad or lazy policing that has caused crimes to go unsolved, and in a few cases, individuals who never should have been able to wear a badge or have the public trust in their hand. So of course those situations need a spotlight. But when you have what we have now, which is a lot of activists masquerading as journalists that try to take those minority cases and portray an overarching reality when the numbers don't bear it out. Well, you tell me. I mean, that's narrative fraud.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's what I have seen sort of happen in media in the last 7 years or so.
Yeah. I'd like to go back to the addiction issue. And addiction, like we said, it's a big factor in all of this. And we talk about addiction to drugs. Have you experienced or had, examples of things that happen, other addictions, being, even video games or whatever?
So I've been writing about addiction my entire career. I wrote an entire book about meth addiction. And after that, the heroin phenomena began and then morphed into the fentanyl crisis. So, and I used to have to keep track for these grants, so it's over 300 addicts on paper, but it's far more than that. It's far more than that. I stopped keeping track after those grants, but like it was, it's over, it's hundreds of addicts now I've spoken to, either formally or informally. I think the next horizon of addiction in this country is tech addiction. And I worry it could soon become a greater destructive force in the social fabric than anything we've ever encountered before. I could see a very near future where tech addiction is destroying more lives and causing more isolation than meth and heroin and fentanyl, or gambling addiction or sex addiction or whatever it would be.
That's a big statement, especially from you being involved with all these addictions.
Well, think about this.
We already know about the social media addiction that's doing what it's doing to kids, and
yeah, and there's 34, 38 different state attorney generals that have launched essentially a RICO case against Meta over that. And that complaint's interesting to read, because just like the similar civil RICO case that was brought against the pharmaceuticals over oxycodone and Opana and drugs like that, it's alleging that Meta had information, that it had data, that it knew that it was causing addiction and self-harm and suicidal ideation, particularly around teenage girls, through Instagram. And so that's what the complaint alleges from all these different state attorney generals across the country. So there's that in real time. But when I'm talking about a near future where it's worse, I mean, I have known people who are getting addicted to AI relationship bots right now, and they have all the classic hallmarks of addiction: hiding and concealing behavior, living a double life, internalizing self-loathing, and engaging in behavior that's not only disruptive to their daily lives, but disruptive to the people they're closest to around them. These are all bellwethers for addiction, right? And that's just with the chatbots you can play with on your phone right now, and certain companies now have created specifically relationship chatbots, right? Yeah. But just imagine when these bots are better, and with the everything that happened with DeepSeek the last couple of weeks, like, what is the timeline for that? How could you predict that? But just imagine a near future where the bots are slightly better, and they are seamlessly and ubiquitously and affordably merged with VR tech, like wearable VR tech.
Yeah.
It won't.
It's a scary thought.
It won't just be. God, it sounds so dark, but it won't just be people creating boyfriends and girlfriends, or creating facsimiles of someone they wanted to be with that they can't be with. Like, that will happen immediately when that moment comes, right? That'll be happening all the time. There'll be all these questions of people's likeness and personal autonomy, that, like, could become legal questions, right?
Right.
But it's just going to be human nature that some people that are going through some kind of grieving process are going to create digital echoes of people they've lost. Dead children, dead spouses, someone who left you in a divorce and won't talk to you anymore. What is the addictive power of that? I feel like no one is talking about this right now. And I don't feel like our public health apparatus is preparing for it. They're still thinking that's the holodeck on Star Trek or whatever.
Right.
No,
It all seems to go full speed into that anyway, as far as the AI.
we know that's going to happen.
Yeah.
We know that's going to happen. So why are we not trying to calculate what that addictive force, the weight of that addictive force is going to be? We have people, we're not good at getting people clean from meth and heroin and opioids. We can't even deal with that, as we've been talking about. Now imagine virtual spaces that are unhealthy and isolating, but have that same narcotic effect on your brain. So I think tech is the next horizon for addiction, and it worries me that that there's very little conversation about how fast this could arrive, and if we don't know how to solve drug addiction and alcohol addiction, I mean, what is the plan for that?
Well, I'm glad there's people like yourself who are at least bringing this out in the open, at least for consideration.
I've written some think pieces about this, but I'm just one journalist, Even some of the best tech reporters in the country, I haven't seen a lot of pieces about this from them. I think they're probably just trying to deal with all these developments in real time and stay on top of it in a incremental way. Yeah. But I don't see I don't think it's looking too far down the road that moment's going to come when these chatbots and a great wearable VR tech come together in a way you can afford and are just, tentacles on your brain and your psyche.
Right.
Mark Zuckerberg did an interview a few weeks ago with Joe Rogan that if you actually listen to it carefully, it sounds like it probably does exist. It's just not on the market or something very close. Mm-hmm. I would encourage people to really hear what he's saying when they're having that conversation, because I do not think this is far down the road.